Hello, Tristan.
Hey Emil, how you doing?
I'm very good. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Sunday sessions with me and Tristan Stephenson from BlackRock in London and legend in the business and the author of the Curious books. So we're back today with Mackmyra and doing the Sunday sessions. How
Yeah.
has your week been? Good.
Yeah, good, thank you. Pretty productive. Been actually surprisingly busy, even though in lockdown. And yeah, good to be back and drinking more whiskey with you, Emil. Discussing as we work our way through this, all these different whiskies. It's fantastic. Quite exciting to see what's going to come next as well.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, so the Sunday sessions is really our or Mackmyra's take that we wanted to talk about our core range, but also other things about whiskey and how to work with it in cocktails. So I have together with me at 2 p.m. I have Tristan, and then at 3 p.m. I have Iain McPherson from Panda and Sons. So I have two really great bartenders and influencers in the business that helps me out to talk about this because I can talk a lot, but I need someone to really sort it out, and it's no better way to have you on board, Tristan. So
Yeah.
last Sunday we tried the Mac, and a lot of people asked me if you were running, and I told them, yeah, he's running like a lot. So what was you actually running for?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it was obvious last weekend that I look quite tired. In fact, my t-shirt says tired on it this week, in reflection of my endeavors last weekend. But yeah, last weekend I did a challenge to raise funds and awareness for the NHS frontline staff here in the UK. It's for charities that support those staff, with things like recuperation spaces, food, basically just help stuff that helps them do their job to the highest possible standard, even though they're working obviously in very difficult conditions and very long hours at the moment.
Yeah,
So the challenge I set myself was a running challenge, which I hadn't done before, but it was one that I had kind of had in my sights for a while. I do a lot of running. I run in ultra marathons regularly, and I run most days of the week. Anyway, this particular challenge was to run 10 kilometers every 4 hours for 48 hours, non-stop.
holy.
So it's obviously you run quite a long way. You run 120 kilometers in 2 days, but the toughest thing about it is the lack of sleep, because you've only got just a little over 3 hours between each run, and then of course you've got to have showers and get dressed, and you've got to eat and do whiskey tastings and things like that in between these runs. And of course you're getting up in the middle of the night and doing quite long, lonely runs in the dark with a head torch on. So anyway, that was what I did. I slept for 5 hours in total across the entire weekend, and we raised a little over £2,000 for the charities here in the UK.
Well, that's fantastic. Good job.
Thanks.
Good job. So no running today, but maybe some more whiskey tasting then.
Totally. Well, actually, I have been running today, but
Yeah.
I don't plan on running again today. That's the difference
Okay,
between this weekend and last weekend. Definitely whiskey though.
So today we're trying Mackmyra Svensk Rök. Rök means smoke, which is pretty obvious in this one. It's a heavily peated whiskey, but also our take on how peated whiskeys are in general. I think this is a great interpretation of. I think it's like a mixture of a lot of like single malt that has a lot of smoky notes to it, but in our own way, if you know what I mean. Because it's still hard on the peated side, but it has something to do like with a Swedish campfire, because we like campfire. Who doesn't?
Yeah.
So what do you think about what's your impression?
Well, I mean, I'm a big fan of smoky whiskies, and I do always think it's interesting when you get a distillery outside of Scotland, let's say, that makes peated whiskies, because you always find that the smoke component is interpreted differently depending on where in the world the whiskey is coming from. And I think that's because smoke has such a kind of primal connection to us. It's something that the smell that everyone's familiar with. You know, we're all familiar with the smell of barbecue, with campfires, bonfires, you know, beach fires, all these different smoky aromas, and they permeate through our food. And you know, you smell them. You pick up smoky smells when you're walking down the street or whatever, and you're like, oh, that's something strange. Or when you're burning a toast. So it's just an aroma that sort of almost transcends food and drink. Really, it's aroma that sort of permeates well into our lives on a daily basis, and it means different things to different cultures as well. And you might talk about what it means to Sweden specifically, but you do tend to find different aromatic qualities to the smoke depending on where you are. Sometimes smoke can be really sooty and dirty. Sometimes it can be more of a medicinal style smoke that you get on some like Islay whiskies. Other times it can smell almost farmy in its characteristic. I know some whiskies are described as smelling a bit like pig sweat in the style of smoke they have, you know. And then it can be sweet and barbecuey as well, or it can be more of a green, like burnt, fresh wood kind of smoke too. So it's in a way, smoke is one of the true ways in which you can integrate terroir into whiskey. You know, people talk about barley and how that terroir affects the final product, but you know, that's a little bit trickier to get an influence from barley when you've got so many steps of production going on in between the farm and the bottle. But smoke, because it's so pervasive, because it's difficult to get rid of once it's in there, it really can add a sense of terroir, because it depends on what you're smoking. It depends on whether you're smoking wood or peat or something else, and it also depends on what type of wood and what the composition of the peat is, and so on. So it's a fascinating part of whiskey flavor, and always something that I'm intrigued to smell and taste when I get my hands on a bottle produced in a non-traditional area or region.
Yeah, I think that kind of cover everything for it, because I can only agree. But it's also like, it's kind of like the sixth flavor. If you know what I mean. You have because smokiness, it has everything. It has a sweety tone, it has a salty tone, it has sometimes an umami note to it. It sometimes has these tingy feelings. It has everything. So it could be like the sixth flavor if we talk about that, especially in the business.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's an aromatic characteristic rather than taste. But I know what you're saying, because what it tends to do is latch on to taste components of the whiskey and amplify one or dull down another. And the taste components that sit within the whiskey and the other aromatic components, so the tongue components and the other nose components, when mixed with the smoke, will skew the smoke in one direction or another. So that smoke can then become fruity, or it can become, let's say, really sooty and dark, where there's a lot of wood characteristic there, for example, starts to get musty. So this is, I think, smoke is popular amongst whiskey makers because it brings in another variable, another kind of tool that the whiskey maker can use to shape that product into a specific style. That's exactly it. That was kind of the thing I was going for too. I think it's really smart to say that it really evolves the whiskey in so many different waves, and it also people in general seem to have different take on what they feel about whiskey, because everybody has a different palate. We know that, but I feel that smoke is really the thing that stands out in how people react to whiskeys in general. If you don't like smoke, you will not like a smoked whiskey, but you can still feel that you have a sweet note to it that you actually like. Yeah, I mean, it's divisive, isn't it? It does tend to split a room. You don't tend to find many people who are like, I like smoke, it's okay. People tend to be either like, yeah, I like peaty whiskey, it's good.
Yeah,
I'll drink.
It's like
whiskey.
coriander.
Yeah, like coriander. Or they go the other way and they're like, I don't want to touch that stuff. I do think they've become more popular recently, partly due to, and I don't know if this is true in Sweden, but in the UK, the rise of kind of barbecue food and smoked food has been a big thing in the last 10, 15 years. And I think that smoky whiskey has sort of jumped on board that train and enjoyed the ride as well.
Yeah, I think that's one thing. But in Sweden, we also it has a lot to do with tradition. We smoke a lot of things. We smoke a lot of fish. We smoke everything we can smoke. So everyone grew up with a smoky note to it, if you know what I mean. We didn't grow up with campfires in the sense that you maybe do in UK or US. We grew up with actual flavors that you have on Christmas or during Easter. You have a lot of smoky flavors, so we always have something to do about. We always have the preference to. It could be even licorice or salt or whatever. We have it in our DNA to like smoke, or at least we tried it when we were small kids.
Yeah,
in some way.
It's preserving method, right? So
Yeah, exactly,
that's the reason for it.
Yeah.
And of course, its origins in whiskey is around the most abundant fuel source that's there for you to dry your barley after you've germinated it. That's where the peat smoking in Scotland comes from, anyway. It was just so happened that they used to use peat because there was lots of peat around, and therefore your whiskey ends up smoky tasting.
Cool. So if you should do a cocktail with this, what are you going for then? How do you want to like preserve the smokiness into it? How do you think when you do a cocktail with that you should implement smoke, but it will not take over?
Yeah, sure. You need to be careful with it because even smoke lovers tend to want to have that smoke harmonized, perhaps dialed down slightly when it comes to a cocktail. Because smoky whiskies are great to drink by themselves, and that high strength of the spirit helps to cut through some of the smokiness and make it more palatable. But if you just sweeten that and put it in an old-fashioned, what tends to happen is you end up with something that can end up a little bit sort of cloying, and can get sickly after a while. So you do, in my opinion, need to dial it down a bit. And also, I think there's certain cocktails where it's difficult to use smoky whiskies. Highballs, for example, it's a challenge to use a smoky whiskey in there because a highball in its DNA tends to be quite long, refreshing, carbonated. And when you start to put smoke in there, it challenges some of those refreshing qualities that you'd hope to get from a highball. It's not impossible, but it's just harder. So I am making an old-fashioned style drink today, which you'll be familiar with because when I was over in Stockholm at the Grand, we played around with this drink a little bit. Only we were missing one of the ingredients. Well, not today. This drink is one that I came up with for the Black Rock menu, the original Black Rock menu 5 years ago, and it's called Campfire, which we've mentioned already. Sort of how campfires are quite an evocative style of smoke that can, really be nostalgic for people when they're thinking about smoke, and when they're drinking. And the whole idea of this particular cocktail is that you sip on it and it sort of evokes that sensation of sitting around a campfire. It's dark, clear sky. You've got to see the stars. You've got the crickets chirping. You're toasting some marshmallows. And you pull out a hip flask of whiskey and have a sip on it. And the challenge is to bring all of those different components, even the stars, into the drink, which is no mean feat. So what I do is I use 3 ingredients. Obviously, we've got the Mackmyra. Now, interestingly, I'm mixing that with another whiskey, which would perhaps feel a bit weird for a lot of people. Like, why are you mixing one whiskey with another? Surely that whiskey's great as it is, or all the other whiskey's great as it is. Why mix them together? I'm not afraid of doing that because I think that each whiskey is its own set of flavors that should be appreciated, but they can be mixed, and the power of 2 can make them even better than the sum of their parts, especially in the context of a mixed cocktail. And I mentioned before that if I've got a really smoky whiskey, I want to dial that smoke down slightly in the cocktail so it doesn't become too heavy and cloying. So I'm not mixing it with another malt whiskey. I'm actually mixing it with a bourbon, which makes more sense than you think, because most whiskies are matured in ex-bourbon barrels. So there's a little bit of bourbon in most malt whiskies. All I'm doing is amplifying that bourbon characteristic. And by mixing it with Svensk, what we're going to find is that some of the sort of caramel, butterscotch, vanilla, white chocolate qualities that are not particularly potent in the Mackmyra are going to just be elevated slightly by this whiskey. So it's going to round off the smoke with a little bit more cask character effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to sweeten that with sugar syrup that's got a marshmallow extract in it. Now you can buy that from online or from stores or whatever. It's usually found in like stores for baking cakes online. You'd sweeten icing with it or whatever. But you can add it to a sugar syrup. It's really strong stuff. I can smell it in here, and I've put like 3 drops in about 25 ml of sugar syrup. I've used sugar syrup made from coconut sugar, which is my preferred sugar, just because it's got some natural sort of toffee caramel notes to it, which again is going to bolster some of those cask characteristics and round everything out. So I'll just pour it into the glass. We're going to go 2 parts of the Mackmyra to 1 part of the bourbon. I'm not going to measure it because I pretty much know how this is going to go. So, Mackmyra, like you can use any bourbon, but I would recommend one with a fair amount of maturation character on it. And then we'll put around about 10 to 15 ml of this sugar syrup in it. And then I'll give it a good stir. And yeah, you want that sensation of pulling this hip flask. It's a hip flask of unsmoked whiskey out of your pocket. You take a sip on it, and then the smoke of the campfire, of that wood, and the smell of those marshmallows that are just getting a little bit crispy on there, all meld together as you sip it and as you smell. And you take your big swig of it and wonder if life could ever get better. If I was better organized, by the way, I would have garnished this with a toasted marshmallow, but I totally forgot. So
you can't go out. So.
Yeah. You smell the marshmallow and the smoke on the nose. Those are the 2 aromas you get. And immediately you think, okay, toasted marshmallows. And then when you sip it, the sweetness of that marshmallow, it's almost like candy floss flavor with the smoke and some of those kind of caramel chocolate notes from the bourbon as well, all sort of meld together into this. It's like if they made candies that tasted of whiskey, it would be something like this, you know.
Okay, cool. I think that is a good reference for people. If they make candy that tastes like whiskey, this is it, but for actual adults.
Yeah, but
that's cool. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I think a lot of people. Can you do like a simple syrup with only like melting down marshmallows to get kind of the same vibe, or is that hard to do?
No, that doesn't work because if you melt marshmallows, it basically turns into like meringue.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever made marshmallows, but melting them is the same process in reverse.
Okay.
When you make marshmallows, it's basically meringue, so like sugar and egg white. But what you do is you put gelatin in there as well, so it's like a jellified meringue. Anyway, yeah, when you apply heat to it, it just turns back into like a jelly meringue mixture. You'd never get any flavor out of it. And in any case, the way they flavor marshmallows is with marshmallow flavoring. So you're just buying the same stuff that the marshmallow would use.
Okay. Yeah. Who knew that marshmallow actually had a flavoring? Because it's. but I tend to know we have some in Sweden. We have something called like these small cars that would actually. People trying to do back in the 50s, they wanted to do Swedish marshmallows in Sweden, but they completely failed. And it looked like small Bugatti cars instead. And this is the most sold can in Sweden ever.
I've got, actually, you know what? I've just realized I've got a bag downstairs.
Which with those ones?
Yeah, of those. When I picked up, I was in Stockholm because I was like, I was saying to our mutual friend, Isaac, I was like, what's the most typical Swedish candy? And he was like, oh, you got to buy these little marshmallow things. And you're right, they look like little cars. Yeah,
they're small Bugatti cars from the 50s and 60s, and they're huge. That's the most sold car.
I should have used them as garnishes. I don't know what I was thinking.
Next time.
Yeah.
The cocktail I'm going for today, I'm doing a flip. I'm a huge fan of flips. I know you are too. But we're doing a flip with honey. And together with Swedish smoke, we're going to do a pretty hefty amount of Swedish smoke. We're going to do like 50 mils, and this is like 45. just to really give that smoky note. It's going to come forward in a hard way, but we're going to use honey and a whole egg. The whole thing about a flip is that you use spirit, syrup, sugar in any way, and a whole egg. That's like the conclusion that I've been doing for the last years, because a lot of people are using cream or half and half or whatever, but I don't think you really need it, because if you use some small ingredient too, you because people seem to doesn't like the note when you get like an egg note to your when you smell it, and people seem to have some hard thing with that, but it's pretty easy to get that away when you just use a little bit of salt and sugar in general, because people seem to have less and less sugar. So they have like 50 mils of spirit and then 10 mils of the syrup, and that doesn't cut it. Yeah. So we have 50 mils of Swedish smoke, Svensk rök, and then we do 30 mils of honey. So this is just some local honey that I did honey water to. So it's like 60 or 70% of honey and 30% of water. This takes like 1 minute to do at home. Just pour it down. One whole egg. We're doing a lot of sitting bartending now, so it's a new way of working.
Yeah, but when we get out of this crisis situation, bartenders are going to have like legs that have atrophied, and they won't be able to stand up. Into something completely new. And this is also like the first time you actually make cocktails with only your socks, not your shoes on. This is the first time. Just to give it a little bit of different tone to this, I use a little bit of sesame oil just to get that fatness to really showcase how you can work with the smoky flavors. So it's like 10 mils of this is a great sesame sauce that we use like with my girlfriend does ramen at home. It's great for just getting that fat note to it and really showcase what Svensk rök is all about. Some salt. And then we're going to dry shake this just to get that creamy note to it. A sitting dry shake. And you get it, it's like, it doesn't take long to get really, you just need to shake it hard for about 3 seconds. You get that, you almost get like a licorice tone to it, which is really good. Just add a little bit of ice, just to dilute it and give it much more chill. You don't have to shake this cocktail so hard because the balance is already there. And you just need to give it a small shake just to get it cold. Yeah, that's good. Just strain it up, and you get this like pretty cool egg toddy color to it. Just add a little bit of salt on the top, and then you're good. Yeah.
Good for Easter cocktails, I think.
Yeah, right. Egg cocktails. I love flips. I mean, they look great because they have that nice opacity to them, don't they?
Yeah.
But they're still quite strong cocktails, really. People underestimate, because you've got egg there, obviously diluting some of the alcohol, but not a lot else, bit of sugar.
Yeah. No, exactly. And it's so easy to make. And people like when you do this at home for guests or whoever, everybody like seems to like flips. They're just a little bit afraid of it because it says it's a whole egg in it, and people seem to be a little bit afraid of that. So people are a little bit afraid of smoky notes, and people are some afraid of eggs. So combining that is really free for a lot of people.
It's terrifying cocktail for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. This is great for Halloween. So great talking to you again, Tristan. We have a deal now that you can even check it out. So you can buy Svensk rök from mackmyra.cu.uk, and you get I think it's £8 discount that goes directly to BlackRock. to support you guys during this difficult era. But yeah, that's all for now. And the Sunday sessions will come back next Sunday. And then we're going to do Svensk Ek, the Swedish oak, and try that out.
Great.
I'm really looking forward to see what you're going to do then.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Emil. That was great.
Thank you, Tristan. Stay healthy.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.